Welcome to today's webinar presentation by Informed Decisions. This is going to be document management on the IBMi, a comprehensive approach to document management. Today, we're going to keep the webinar presentation to about 20 to 30 minutes. I know I blocked off an hour and that was a little accidental, but we're going to try to keep this at a manageable pace so everyone can get back to their busy day. And with that being said, I know we have a lot of folks that have been talking before we actually started this officially, but I want to acknowledge our audience today. There's quite a variety of folks out there visiting us. We have experienced IBMi professionals, new users to the platform. We have some current customers out there, some new visitors, business partners, and some international guests. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us today. And as you can see, I'm Orlando Ferrer with Informed Decisions, and we're going to follow me today as we explore document management on the IBMi. My goal today is really how to show you document management and how it's evolved beyond just printing a spool file on the IBMi, and how today's approach of document management benefits the primary stakeholders, which are really some of you guys out there right now: administrators, the end users, could be customers, and of course the organization itself as a business. So with that being said, we're going to get our show on the go. We're going to do a couple of slides, just a few, and then we're going to actually get into some some showing of what we're going to actually show you here today. So before we get to the future, let's talk about the history and a little. I just want to touch upon this a little because this will make a little more sense as we get into the presentation. Over the years, as many of you know, the terminology used to identify the operating system and the hardware that runs that operating system has become confusing. In general, naming between both hardware and operating system has become interchangeable, and the naming throughout history has changed multiple times. So it gets even confusing when a lot of those names are still being used: AS400, I series, System I, and today we refer to this as the IBMi. And so this can get a little confusing. As you can see from the screen, that we have had different hardware names and software names throughout the history as we've grown. The current names being, of course, the power system, the IBM power system, and the IBMi for the OS. But there's 2 points that can be said about this throughout the history of it all. One is, as new technology capabilities advance forward, both the operating system and the hardware have evolved to meet those capabilities for you to use, the end users. And the second point behind this all is having an operating system which has the principal goal of leveraging the system's computing power while insulating everyday users from the burden and complexities of the technology, while powered by reliable, efficient hardware, has proven to be an extraordinary combination along the way. So it's something that is pretty cool just as the history of the technology goes. And with that, we actually burst out into something that is where we are heading out into today here. So as data has become available in database files and also spool files like SES spool files and AFPDS spool files, it bursts out into different ways of delivering that information, from print, email. Right now in fashion is XML, fax, FTP, which could be secured FTP. And that gets into sending out information in all sorts of different ways for these different types of groups. When it comes to print, we're printing reports, we're doing dynamic reports, we're doing dynamic forms in which we're pulling and taking out information dynamically, different formats like Excel, TIFF, we're writing checks with microlines, all sorts of cool things in there. When we're sending out emails, of course, the most popular way or attachment to send out an email is PDF. And with the advancement technologies from past to now, we're actually can do that in color, and we can do even password protected PDFs right from the system. XML, we're not only exporting XML reports, but also importing XML reports into the system. Faxing has been traditional fax, and I know faxing has been less and less over the years, unless you're in specific vertical markets like in the medical industry. Um, is traditional over the line type of faxing, and of course we can do fax services as well from the system. And of course FTP and FTPS and SFTP, which are secured FTP methods out there. So all this is actually sending out information from the system. And we're going to put that aside a little because, and actually shift gears and directions. So we've been sending things out. Well, the modern way is right now to, or the current way with the technology that's developed, is to bring information back in. So today's business cycles, they've been moving quickly and getting faster, and they're just going to keep getting faster. And in the future, this is going to be such an important feature of our world that we really got to find ways to make this efficient for us. And here you'll see some examples of some of the things that we can do now. And like I said, this is some because there's an abbreviated presentation, but we're actually looking at document capture, which is capturing documents that actually been scanned into a folder that we're automatically grabbing with some automation, or even grabbing from an email account automatically. We're reading those documents, extracting data, making that data available for other processes on the IBMi. We're archiving documents either from the outside world or from the inside of the IBMi and making them available to our end users. Included in that is signature capture, capturing signatures. And depending on what country you're in or what processes you're in, signature capture does play it can play a significant role. Web forms. Web forms are digital forms that can be sent out to recipients that they can fill out, submit back in, and that data can electronically be submitted back into your database in the system. So it's a great way to, and a good example for that is when you're dealing with ISO recertification of your vendors. I think that is a 2-year cycle on recertification. Every 2 years, you got to get that those folks recertified. So it's a great way to it's a great tool to get that done without just relying on emails and tracking, pieces of paper around in PDFs and having to re-key in information. Let them fill it in, let them submit it, automatically ingest that into your system, into your process and their workflow, traditional workflow in which we are actually following a process or documents through steps, and what used to be the manila envelope with that got passed around the office from person to person to do a step and then passed to the next person. Well, this is all done electronically. The cool part about this is that we can actually trigger this from the IBMi, send a process out, collect it, follow it through. All sorts of things can happen along the way depending on what your needs are. This is a great option for manufacturing, and then bring it right back in with automation happening along the way. This is all done electronically. It's all done with the system. And as we move on the technology from past to now, we've actually have the option of being able to do more customization with different languages. Open source on the system has really opened up quite a bit of options. There's more that's going to be happening and has happened. And I know traditionally we've had PHP, we've had some Java, we've had some other options. Of course, we have RPG, but we actually have some cool options that are going to be opening up. And this allows for a lot more customization, especially when we want integration or handshaking between the IBMi and different systems that are out there. That could be cloud-based, cloud services, could be on-premise systems, that different machinery out there. There's a lot of folks right now on this webinar that are doing robotics on their plants, and we may need to take data from those robots periodically and bring those in to the system. So we can actually help out with taking that data, which used to be, okay, let's put it into an Excel sheet and drag it in, or have somebody key it in, or so we can actually bring that in automatically. So there's more customization of these cool things that we can do out there. Okay, so with that being said, and the burst of information and things that we've been sending out and now we'll bring in, we're going to actually show you a simplified version of what this could look like, or at least a streamline. This webinar is a little more overall picture of everything, and it's going to, in later future webinars, we'll have some details on how-tos, very specific modules that we're going to go into. So this is an overall view of what can be done here from some of the points that I was just talking about. So in this example, we're actually going to talk about a process and somebody making a new order. And this is going to be affecting accounting. It's going to affect our production folks. It's going to affect our salespeople. More importantly, it's going to affect our customers that we want that interaction with. And we want some of these things to happen automatically in the background, thus helping the organization save money because they're not relying on somebody to key in information or monitor something to automatically happen. In this case, we're going to actually take an order in. Customer's going to get a confirmation via email. We're going to get, it's going to go through a whole delivery process. We'll talk about that a little. And then, of course, the customer's going to get a bill to pay. And then, of course, we have to pay our vendors, our suppliers. So we're going to talk a little about that as well and that information. So we're going to get right into it in here. Well, we're not done yet. And with that being said, I'm just going to bring in our system. And here, this is our IBMi. And I'm going to launch a little something in here that we have. I'm going to go into a archive or a out queue that I have, and I'm going to send a spool file that I have into a couple of engines that I have working right now. And let me just send this off in there. This is going to be an out queue that's being monitored by one of those engines. And I have two engines right here. One just took off. This is going to be handling our forms. And then two more that are going to be handling our archiving. While that's going on in the background, we're going to talk about this. In this example, actually, since I figured I'm the only one that I want to show you this, so I'm actually sending these to me. I did this earlier today. And the spool file that I launched this from was to set off a confirmation for the shipment. I actually split that off. It was a spool file that actually was two different customers. It split them off. It sent me an email with the order confirmation. It gives me a little information on the actual body of the email itself. I made it really simple. And the form itself is like this. This is for a hops company and kept the coloring of the actual document in green to kind of follow their logo. And it just gives us an order confirmation. It gives us detailed about the order number, specifically what they ordered, the amount to expect, and of course, a little information that they're going to get a shipping notice within the next 24 hours. And of course, we added to this some technology within this that automatically is done. We've added two-dimensional barcode, QR code, that has all this data in it. We've actually added a little barcode on the bottom for if they needed to scan the order number specifically, if they had a scanner to do that with. And there's more additional reasons for this that we'll talk about when we get into the invoice part of it. So a nice little pretty document, real modern looking, real clean. A nice thing is that in the middle here, we actually have a promotional item that we've inserted in there dynamically for this customer. So different customers may receive different deals or different promotions. And a way to handling that is by using the system's ability to dynamically insert text into the documents itself. And as you look in there, let's go back here, we'll go into the other customer's confirmation and we'll look at in there, and you'll notice that they actually have a different discount set up for them. Okay, and you see our new emails are coming in. They're the ones that we've launched off. So it's automatically processed as in the background as we were just talking. So pretend it's a little later in the future and our production folks, and again, this is an abbreviated example, so I'm not going into actual productions and bill of ladings into picking lists and packing lists or anything like that. So we're just abbreviating this whole demonstration into what the customer sees. But the customer is going to receive a email with their shipping confirmation, and It's going to look a little similar to what we had. It's going to give them a very clean, yes, this is a shipping confirmation. It's going to give them their shipping information that we extracted from the system and inserted into this document and then sent out to them. Now, excuse me. Now you notice that in here, we keep the format very similar to the original one. One of the reasons for that is that we're leveraging the actual design of the document to use multiple times for different scenarios. This makes the management of documents a lot more efficient. You don't have to have this very specific document for every single one. By leveraging the design, you can actually you can do a lot more documents with a lot less effort in there. Okay, so we kept it nice and simple. And of course, after shipping, the customer's going to get an invoice. And the invoice for this, we actually changed around a little on the coloring because I want to make sure that they realize, as an organization, as a business, and when we actually get this out, we want to make sure that they notice this is a different type of document. This is an invoice. It says it clearly, but we want to make sure. So we changed the coloring around. Same type of style. Again, we leveraged that design to be multi-used, and we even give them a different special on this one in color. Notice this is a color PDF, which is nice. So earlier I mentioned that we have a QR code with all the information, and then we also have a barcode on the bottom of the invoice number. It used to be the order number. In this case, this company is the order number and invoice number are the same numbers. That is going to be useful for the receiving side. Remember, we're looking at this from the point of view of the different people, the stakeholders. And for us as a company, we want to make sure that we get paid on time. And as more and more people are using document capture, they're going to be inserting these documents when they receive them into their own document capture system. So now we want to make sure that our invoice number is clear, invoice date, all these parameters that are needed to pay the invoice on their end. We want to make sure those are very easily identifiable, easily selectable. We want to make sure we don't have anything around them that's going to obscure that data when they scan that in. And we made that a little easier by triggering all that or having all that data in a QR code that they can read from. And we made this very noticeable as yes, pay us. Here's our remit information. We can add any data dynamically in there and so on. So hopefully that kind of talks a little more about that. And the way we do this is that we're using applications on our system. We'll go into those a little. Again, we're going to have different webinars coming up that are going to be more instructional on what we're going to be doing. But I'll pick on our invoice application that we've done in here. We do all sorts of things, and then we can even put terms and conditions on the last page very easily. We can actually do this all sorts of ways. In this case, we are triggering this document to go out by email, and we're picking up the email directly from the spool file. However, we can pick that up from a database file as well. So you can actually have a master database that contains your customers in it, and we can actually pick up that email from that database. Additionally, we can actually do data itself onto the document from a database. So we can actually do database mapping right onto that document from any database that you want. And as the technology of the IBMi has progressed forward, so has been what we can do in these documents. So I'm picking on barcodes a little here today, but it used to be that our options were to do barcodes that were based on fonts and soft fonts specifically. Nowadays, with newer technology, newer options on the system, we've been able to change that around to do scalable barcodes. So if I wanted to control the height and width of that barcode and just not have it to be a natural barcode, I can adjust those heights and width of that barcode. And it makes it a lot easier, gives a lot more flexibility, especially if we're doing packing slips in which we are drop shipping for different providers. So if our customer's Home Depot, as an example, or any similar type of retailer, and we're drop shipping for them, then we can actually create a packing slip based on their specifications, get that shipping out using that packing slip. And they sometimes have very specific specifications when it comes to the barcodes that they want on those packing slips. So this makes that a lot easier to handle. So we have things like that and some of the automation that goes along with that. So these had gone out, and what we want to do now is kind of shift gears and we say, okay, they've gone out. What are we gonna, we know that they went to the customer, and that's going to benefit the customer. It's going to help the organization. Things are running in the background. Well, when it comes to the accounting folks, remember, because we were also going to talk about our AR folks and accounts payable. So our AR folks, they're going to make sure that the vendors is out there, is paying their bills. And if they had a question that came up from an invoice, or the person said, hey, I don't have a copy of the invoice, or did I really get a shipping notice? What was the shipping, tracking number? Well, we inserted those documents into our document center, which is run on the IBMi. This document center took those items and inserted them in here with metadata. So we only have 2 in our example right now, but we can actually have in there multiple ones you can have a list of these, you can have thousands of these in there that are searchable based on the metadata that we put it in there. So we can actually search on the invoice numbers, a date range if we wanted to, a customer number, or in there we can actually different customer numbers, it tracks them, we can actually bill to, and so on. And that information is available for the person to look up and see, and they can email it out of here. They can actually download it. They can add notes, all sorts of cool things that they can do from this point. So we know that we have the actual invoices and we've done the shipping notices, so we're tracking those. So let's change gears now to accounts payable. Accounts payable is going to pay our suppliers, and instead of having them to receive, having that person receive an invoice, key in that information, and then go through the process of paying them, we're going to try to make their life easier. And by doing that, we're actually going to ingest a bill that they've received from their supplier. And right now, we're going to change gears. This is our capture option in here that we have, our solution that we're working with. And we're going to have a invoice that came in. We're going to capture this as though if it was scanned in to a folder. We're manually doing this so you can actually see this, because if we didn't, you wouldn't see anything. It would just run under the hood. And this could be done, again, this could be captured from an email account. It could be captured from a folder, different places. There's a lot of options to this. And in here, we've actually scanned in 2 different bills that we actually received, and we're going to go through the process of actually identifying what bills they are, because you can actually have multiple bills sent from different companies, different providers, different vendors, all sorts of people like that. So this will actually scan those in, identify that document, and once it identifies the document, it's going to trigger a process to index that data. And what's going to happen is going to run an OCR process, extract the data. We can do database verifications. We can do verifications manually by a person. We can actually add parameters to this that say, if the data doesn't meet these requirements, then kick it out and have a person look at it. In this case, we're just running through the whole process. It's sending the information over to our IBMi system, in which is going to get ingested into our iView document center. That process has just finished. And we go back to our iView document center. And if we look under our vendor invoices now, we'll see our documents that we just scanned in. So we are now able to look at these. The cool part is that all this data that we collected is data that exists now on our IBMi in a file. And this data can be ingested into your ERP accounting system for the purposes of paying that account, that bill through your accounts payable system. And all that data wasn't entered manually. It was all done automatically. So when that comes in as a paper form, it can get scanned in, picked up, automatically processed, or even better yet, one of my favorites is monitoring an email account. The invoice is directly sent in there, it's picked up, automatically processed, and ingested into the system for processing. Great options to to do this with. Now you're thinking, well, what if somebody goes in there and they have to look around and they have to bounce around from document archives and so on? Well, we can do some related documents. So if somebody called in and say, hey, I had a question about this invoice, and accounts payable person's looking around, or even accounts receivable and so on, they can actually find the document itself and hit our related documents. And we've set this up to bring up any document that's related to this order. In this case, we have the shipping, we have the invoice itself, so we can actually pull up every single one of them all at the same time and then say, yeah, let me look at the what was the invoice that we actually sent out, and what are the related documents that are part of this. We can just look at them all. Okay, there's a shipping order, we know that this is a tracking number, it actually was sent out, it was all sorts of stuff, anything related into this. Again, this is just an example, but as you can imagine, that applications to this are pretty cool in your process. Now you don't have people standing up, having to go to a file cabinet, do any searching. As many of you are experienced and understand this, that making this easier for folks, especially now in the age of, this whole year that we've had of COVID, people working remotely from home, you don't have file cabinets at your house for work stuff. Making this available to them makes their life a lot easier. So you can actually have accounting people working at home and able to do their work and be able to share information at the speed of your system. So it works pretty cool in that sense, making it available. The sign-on is basically, it's secured sign-on that you actually have to log into the system. There's some aspects of this. You can keep this confined into your own environments and so on. So it's really cool. This is a browser-based system, so you can just log in and using your regular browser. You don't need to have a fat client on everyone's PC to do this. Okay, so with that kind of wrapping up in there, I'm going to show you a couple other things that we've talked about in our example. From our example in here. So we actually talked a little about earlier in one of the slides about workflow. And I'm just going to come in here and just show you just a little tad about workflow. If I get my password correctly in there. Yes, I know Google. Chrome likes to yell at me because it doesn't like my passwords. In here we have different processes of workflow, and I'm in here as an admin. We're going to actually look at a little setup that we have for workflow, just so you can get a feel of what workflow is and how it operates in here. So in here, we actually have a workflow process that we've actually put in here from start to end. We can actually follow a process in there, following the different steps. Some of these are automated, some of these are getting handed off to folks to decline or take on, and some of these are just automatic process along the way. But the cool thing is, as you can see, we can actually set this up in multiple ways to follow or push a document process for signatures, authorization, approvals, processing, all sorts of different things that we can do in this with workflow. And as you go in here, you saw our iView. We actually have our web forms as well that we talked about in here as well. Okay, we'll get into this. In web forms, yes, I know. In web forms, you actually see you can actually get a feel for this. You can actually see that we can actually attach web forms. This is a real simple generic one in here, but you can actually get a feel that when we create this and we work with this, we can actually send this up to a customer. They'll get a link. They click on the link. They can get an email with explanations on what to do. They fill in the data, and then they submit that back to us, and that data can get back into our system. Okay, so I did want to keep this to about 20 to 30 minutes in today's discussion as we were talking about this. So, and we are approaching that time. But as you saw, we were able to automatically send out information to a customer as an order came into the ERP system, get the confirmation out to the customer. Once the I'm grouping this together for delivery. It could be warehousing, it could be packing, it could be production, it could be the trucking folks. But I just grouped it together. Once that process is done, we got them out a shipping confirmation with the shipping information automatically. From that, a invoice is generated and sent to that customer automatically for payment. And of course, we talked a little about our paying our invoices for suppliers in there as well. So we've come to the end of our discussion for today. This is being recorded and it's going to be available at informeddecisions.com on the resources and videos. Again, I want to thank you for your participation. And for more instructional webinars, which will be coming here in the future, those are coming up. Next month, we are planning a specific webinar in Spanish for our international IBM folks that we have out here visiting. And webinars to look out for that are coming up are going to be practical options from start to end on document capture. We're going to actually be going through a whole project on that. We're going to be doing some document automation, making the machines do the work for us. We're going to convert and distribute documents, and we're going to go into those as well. We're going to automatically generate documents for distribution, and we're going to actually create those forms. So you're going to see that process from start to end. And we're going to also, later on in the year, we're going to get back into capture and handling different documents, whether it be orders coming in, whether it be purchase orders, whether it be invoices, all different types of orders. We're going to try to hopefully have a medley of different documents that are being captured and how they how they're going to come into the IBMi system. So if you have any questions right now, please, there's the chat box that you can use to send questions, or also the question and answer options on the webinar. And if not, if you wanted to see something real specific on how to create a form, how iView works, how the capture works in more detail, and you can't wait for the next webinar, you want to see that now, please, more than happy to show you. That, of course, we can get into an online session on that and show you specifically any of those areas in there. So more than happy to show those for you. So feel free to give me a call. There's my direct line on the screen, 949-272-3841, or our main line at 949-709-5838, extension 104, or use my email address in orlando@informeddecisions.com. So thank you very much. I appreciate your attendance. Thank you for joining me.